said, well, how did you do it? I said, was there poison involved? And he goes, oh, no. And I said, did you suffocate them? And he goes, yeah.
Hey everyone, it's Anne Emerson, and I have got to tell you about this extraordinary interview that I heard. It's out of Albany, New York. CBS6's anchor Greg Floyd interviewed a man who confessed to killing his parents and then burying them in the backyard. I mean, it was an unbelievable moment, and yes, it went completely viral.
You suffocated your parents.
Yeah,
That was the best way to take their lives, through suffocation.
basically.
Greg has been in news for 45 years. He's set to retire at the end of this year. And then this extraordinary event happened. I'm so glad he had a minute to talk to us about it. Greg, welcome to Criminally Obsessed.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I really do appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words. It's been something, and it's been an incredibly interesting and sad story to follow.
Well, it is exactly because we have two victims here. I have to ask you, I mean, have you ever met Lorenz Kraus before? Is this the first time you met him when all this went down?
Yes, he was unknown to us in the news business. No, I had never met him before. No.
How did this interview happen? Can you take me back?
Sure. What basically happened here, police showed up at this home on Crestwood Court in Albany, a nice quiet neighborhood, residential neighborhood, and a large gathering of police showed up, lots and lots of cars. That's how the media all found out about it. Neighbors alerted us, and they were calling it a financial crimes investigation, not saying much more. And then a day passes, and we learn they have found human remains. And we learn the next day they have found 2 sets of human remains. And we learn as we go along that the elderly couple who lived in that home, had not been seen in 8 years. They had suddenly, in essence, vanished. No one thought much of it at the time because the son had told them that they moved back to Germany, their home country. So that was that. Until this, for 8 years, no one thought much about this couple until the police showed up to check out the Social Security checks that were being sent to them. And then things just spiraled from there. The son, after the police held a news conference on Thursday, 2 days after this all started, they held a news conference at 2:00. Immediately after, the son contacted media outlets with an email and a statement, a manifesto, as we called it. He called it a statement, all politically oriented, that he wanted us to publish on our website. Our news director called him. He put his phone number on the statement, called him immediately and said, listen, we'll publish your statement if you'll come over here and do an interview with us. And he said, okay. And he apparently got in his car and drove this way. And with virtually no notice, we sat down and started the interview.
Well, Greg, I mean, what did you think of him when he came through the door? What was your first impression of Lawrence?
Well, I don't think I even had a preconceived notion once I saw him. And as an interviewer, you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but it became obvious quickly that we were dealing with a different kind of individual here. He's very smart, very intelligent, but also a bit different.
You know, there's something special about our family that we can somehow read each other's minds. My goal is for the American people to recognize that there's 40 million boomers. They're all going to go through the same kind of problems. It affects all of us, and we need to widen up the law so that people can deal with these kind of problems.
As I've told other people, one of the things I think that really helped this interview and made everything work was that there was no preparation time for it. He was on his way to the station. My news director had, even before he told me that the gentleman was coming, my news director was getting the camera guys set up, getting everything set up. He wanted to alert the police. He was concerned about safety for our building with a potential alleged killer coming into the building. So he was getting some nuts and bolts taken care of. Then he said, oh yeah, I got to go talk to Greg and tell him to come do this interview. So there was virtually no prep time, which I think worked out in a very advantageous way. I didn't go in with any questions, with anything prepared. We just sat down and we started talking.
I mean, so you had basically 10 minutes to get your notes together, figure out what was going on. Did you have any inkling that you were dealing with a murderer at that point?
I was pretty sure that was the case. There were really no notes. All I did was read his manifesto. But it seemed fairly logical that there was a very good chance this man did kill his parents. Our news director, when talking to him on the phone and asking him to come over, asked him, did you commit this murder? And he said, I'm taking the fifth. I'm not talking about what happened. I want to talk about my statement and my political thoughts. I want to get this out there to the world.
Did they die at your hand? That's the question.
Right. I'll have to leave it for that statement.
But that's not in the statement. And I think it's important for people to know what happened to your parents.
Right.
They were your parents. You loved them. They were deteriorating. What did you do?
I have to plead my Fifth Amendment rights until I can disclose it with my statement there.
There was no inkling that he would tell us what would happen, but I wanted to give it my best shot to find out what happened on that quiet street 8 years ago.
So you start the interview, and he's not giving up the ghost at the beginning, is he?
He's not. So I just got him talking about his parents a little bit. We talked about them a bit. I would keep coming back to the idea of, what happened? What did you do? Tell me in August of 2017, what became of your parents? And he said a couple of times, he mentioned invoking the Fifth Amendment. And I did say to him politely, I said, I'm not an officer of the law. I'm not an officer of the court. There's no need to invoke the Fifth Amendment with me.
I have to protect my Fifth Amendment rights on this until the right time.
I'm not an attorney. I'm not an officer of the law. You don't have to say that to me.
Yes, but I mean, whatever I say here is going to be held against me elsewhere. Right?
Of course, but you probably answer to a higher authority anyway in the long run.
And he said, well, yes, but it could impact my legal dealings down the road. And I said, well, yes, you're right about that. But I said, I think you want to tell us what happened, And I think people, need to know what happened. I think your parents, I'll tell you this too. And I haven't watched the interview again since it happened. I've watched lots of clips of it, because we used them on our newscast, but I haven't watched the full interview again. So I don't remember exactly each line of what was said. But, I talked about the idea that I just thought it was the right thing to do to have people know what happened. And eventually, after about 8 or 9 minutes, we got to that place.
When I was going through it with you, I felt like I was sitting right next to you as you were going through it. I got nervous for you because I was like, God, is he going to stand up and walk away? Is he going to, what was he doing? Like his body, he didn't seem like he was going to be violent or anything, but at the same time, I was just nervous that he wasn't going to give you what you wanted.
Yeah. I think once we got going, I felt a sense of confidence that he would take us where he wanted us to go. And there was never I never felt personally threatened or in harm's way in any way. I'm not sure why. I never did. I think because we were just so laser focused on what was happening in the conversation. But I really felt that he was going to come clean. I got that sense of him as we went on. I've interviewed, hundreds, not thousands of people in my life. And you get a feel in the interview of what's going to happen and what the person wants to have happen and what you can do to make certain things happen. And I felt that's where we were going.
So you thought he was going to confess to you if you kept up?
I did.
You were right. I mean, and it was not right away. I mean, the first thing he said was that, I think I was just listening to it. It said about 2.5 minutes in, he said that he had buried them in the backyard.
Right. Which is a partial confession. Not, they could have died of natural causes. Not that it would be likely that two parents would die at the same time of natural causes. But once he said that, I was trying to make clear to him, well, you said you killed them then. If you buried them in the backyard, you've said you killed them.
What did you do to your parents?
I buried them in their property.
You buried them in the backyard of that house in Albany.
Right.
And, we got to the point where he talked about their infirmities and the fact that their quality of life had deteriorated so much. It just doesn't seem that, and again, I talked to him the next day too, as I think and we talked more about this then, about, who was he to decide when his parents' lives should end, and how serious were these infirmities? Were they just typical, the typical deterioration of people getting older, or were they at death's door already? I'm not sure it was the latter.
No, I mean, was he playing God? I think was what you said.
Right.
Are you, who are you to play God?
I did say that in the jailhouse interview that we did the next day, which astounded me that he wanted to talk again.
I know. Why did he want to talk again? What was all that about? Was this an ego thing?
Yeah, it might be. And I think he still has this idea that he wants to that he wants to get his political musings out there.
There's a political defense, and the most important law in this country is New York State ratification law, which says that the people have the power to reassume the powers of government whensoever it is necessary to their happiness. And so I appeal to that as having prosecutorial immunity for this case.
It's pretty much a certainty that's not going to happen.
And it was such a strange interview. It was at, in the Albany County Jail. We were in the large visitors room. There were guards right there. And as I walked in, I noticed a young man walk out of a smaller room, one of the places where a lawyer meets with their client. And this man walked out in a suit, and I saw he'd just been talking to a young female inmate. And he gives me a nod and a wave, and I give him a nod and a wave back, and I proceed on in. And then I noticed out of the corner of my eye, just as I look back at my photographers, we're getting ready to go, that man was still in the room, which I thought was odd, but okay. And I asked Mr. Kraus, I think just one question. And he starts to answer, and the man in the suit immediately said, "That's it, the interview's over." And I turn around and he says, "I'm his attorney. I'm ending this interview." And I said, "With all due respect, I just saw the video of the morning's court appearance, and a woman was his attorney, a woman named Rebecca Sokol." And I said, "That's his attorney." And he says, "Yes, she's in the public defender's office. I'm in the public defender's office. We work together. I'm his attorney. I'm part of his legal team, and I'm ending this interview." And I turned to Mr. Kraus. I said, "You want to keep talking?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll keep talking." So I just kept talking. And we got about 7 or 8 more questions in. And then when something fairly incriminating came up, then that lawyer stood up and basically said, "That's it. Lawrence, stand up. We are leaving this room. This interview is over." And so Lawrence followed his attorney's instructions then and stood up and left the room.
Yeah, I think what really the flag that went off in my head was the harsh childhood. As
Yes.
soon as you guys started talking about, well, yeah, it was a harsh childhood or something to that effect,
He
they were
used the
like,
word,
"No, we're out. This is over."
yeah. He used the word harsh, and he said something right before, like he stumbled with his voice, and I thought he said not harsh. And I said, "Do you mean it was harsh?" And he said, "Yes, it was harsh." And then I followed up and asked him, "Would you call your relationship with your parents a loving relationship?" And he said, "No, it was not a loving relationship." It gave me a chill. It's almost giving me a chill.
Yeah.
It is giving me a chill now, again, as I say it right now. And I said, was that a motive for taking their lives? And I believe that was the statement where the attorney said, "That's it, we're done."
I think you're right, and I think you hit the nail on the head, possibly.
I don't know.
Who knows?
I
Yeah.
mean, it was confusing to me. You say it wasn't a loving relationship, but at the same time, he clearly at least acted like he had a deep love for his parents, because according to him, he was doing this out of a sense of duty of a loving son. But if it wasn't a loving relationship, it's, I mean, you deal with crime all the time, man. It's incredibly complicated, and we got what we could, and we'll learn more as we go along here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, can you take me back to the moment where you kind of broke through? And like you said, it was like about 8 minutes into what it was a 30-minute interview, the first interview. And you're at about 8 minutes into it, and you have been methodically like, We're gonna go back to this. No, you need to go back to this." Um, and then he just tells you.
And yeah, it's basically, I said it a couple of times. I tried to stay very calm and very conversational with him. And, he had said something. I said, "So you're saying you killed your parents?" And I think the first time he didn't answer, he just kind of, give a nonverbal answer. And then I said it again. And, he basically just, I can't remember if he nodded or if he said yes at that point. And then I said, "Well, how did you do it?" I said, "Was there poison involved?" And he goes, "Oh, no, no, no." And I said, "Did you suffocate them?" And he goes, "Yeah."
You suffocated your parents.
Yeah,
That was the best way to take their lives, through suffocation.
basically.
And then that's when he gave the chilling description of exactly how he did it.
Which parent did you suffocate first?
My father, and he after he died, my mother put her head on his chest, and she was there for a few hours, and then I finished her.
What went through your mind when he said those words?
You know, I wanted to know more. So it wasn't like, oh my God, no, I'm speechless. It wasn't like that because I wanted to know more. I knew that we all needed to know more. Um, so I just tried to keep things going and ask him more about how it happened and why it happened. And, you know, then what did he do with the bodies? And he told me that he kept them in the house for several days as he
Mhm.
was trying to figure out what to do. You know, morning came and he said it was bright light out and didn't know what to do. He seemed to know right away that he wanted to bury the bodies in the backyard. I'm no criminologist, but it seems to me that normally a person who is going to commit a mercy killing is then going to turn himself in. He's not trying to evade the law necessarily, or he or she would not be necessarily evading the law if they do a mercy killing. But he clearly came up with a plan to try to evade the law, and it worked for him for a long time. And it is, you know, it's, obviously in retrospect, you can think or say anything, but it does seem hard to believe that all these years passed and that clearly neighbors wondered what happened to this couple,
Mhm.
but nothing ever happened until police showed up and really went into action.
How sad.
It is sad, and it brings me back to something I've told my friends who I've talked to about this and told my colleagues is that I just want to make sure we don't forget what we're dealing with here, that we're dealing with the deaths of these two elderly people, as he described them, children of World War II. Wow. Just by all accounts, just a nice, friendly couple, going through life, going through their latter stages of life. Mm, Yeah, I'm sure we don't forget those people I don't want this to look like I'm talking to you and there's any kind of victory lap here or anything. There's no
No.
victory.
Mm-mm.
It's the tale of two people who didn't deserve to die, who did die at the hand of their son.
Well, and, the deaths went unnoticed, and that part of it, of, like, them falling through the cracks of whatever system. I don't know if the Social Security got flagged because woulda gotten flagged if those checks went unopened, or
Hmm.
was he trying to hide it that way? But I guess the fact that they fell through the cracks the way they did with the neighbors, with the grocery store clerk, with people that shoulda known that these 2 people were gone.
Yeah, and they knew they were gone, but they didn't know why. And one thing that we did, the neighbors have been very willing to talk, and they did have suspicions back then. But again, you know how people are. You don't want to get involved. Um, you don't want to cause a ruckus, and they probably figured that it would be much ado about nothing if they did bring it up. But a few neighbors did say this needs to be a lesson to people
Mhm.
that if you think so, it's like if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
At an airport, the same thing. Go with your gut.
Mhm.
Don't worry about stepping on toes or wasting the police's time. If you have a suspicion, we all have to look out for each other, right? And if you have a suspicion, say something. And if some good comes out of that, maybe that could be it. Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, 8 years, that have gone by with it is tough. Why do you think he decided to confess now, 8 years later?
Well, I just think he knew that. I think he knew that he was caught. I think he knew that his time was up. That it had all come crashing down around him. Obviously with cadaver dogs and police officers with shovels, and then an excavator coming in. They were going to find those bodies. I did hear one account. I don't have this confirmed on my own. Not that it's that serious a matter, but I did hear one account of when a police officer walked into that backyard, he was struck by the trees that he saw planted there. And Mr. Kraus had told me that he planted a fruit tree for his mother, and I think for his father too. And I thought I heard, and this could be wrong, and it's not critical to the case or anything, but I thought that I heard that a police officer thought those trees looked odd. They looked out of place. And that's one thing that told them there's something in this backyard.
We need to
I
look.
don't know if it's true, but I just think he knew that his time was up, and the time was now to come clean.
And this was his chance to tell you why the court of public opinion, right? Why he did it.
Yeah, and I did say to him the next day in jail. I said, you've tried to portray this as a mercy killing, but I think that the court of public opinion that you just referred to, and I think that court is saying this is a cold blooded killing. And his response to me was, he said something. I said, "But thank you for that feedback."
I heard that. Yeah.
The court of public opinion seems to say that they're not happy with what they heard from you yesterday, that they think it was a cold-blooded crime. Do you understand people thinking that way?
I'm glad you gave me that feedback. We all are getting old. We're all going to need help, and we're all going to have to decide how to deal with these kinds of problems.
Was that a bummer to him? Like in his face, did he look like, oh, I thought everybody was going to understand where I was coming from?
I kind of think that he did. And that, I think, maybe he was just thinking that's going to be his way out of this. And certainly, you and I know that there's a history of people feeling sympathetic for mercy killings at times, depending on the situation. In no way condoning that. But I do think sometimes there's an element of sympathy.
Mhm.
And I think maybe he was hoping to garner that sympathy. But just from his demeanor and his personality and his way of talking about it, when he said, later that night, I finished her, it just seemed cold blooded and not necessarily merciful.
Well, and New York State's going to have a different feel on this whole thing too. I mean, they're not, I can just see what a judge is going to say when they're like talking about ancient German law and stuff. I mean,
Yes, yeah, and he's talking about that.
mhm.
It's the one time where I don't think I was snarky with him, but in the jailhouse interview, he was going on and on about this board of. He wants the country governed by a board of directors. I can't forget
And
remember if it's a country
isn't he the chairman of the board?
he would be the chairman of the board and
Right.
therefore immune to prosecution.
One of my goals was to create a board of trustees for New York State, and to create that initial trustee, someone needs to know what to do. So I'm making the claim that I'm the initial trustee of the New York State Board of Trustees, and they would have prosecutorial immunity.
And that raises a really interesting question is, yes, this is a confession, but is it a conviction? And that's really where it lands, right?
Of course, his mental state is going to be key in any prosecution and any determination of guilt and of how the prosecution moves forward and how the defense moves forward. He clearly, was confident in what he was saying. But yes, what is his? I did ask him in the interview. I asked him, "Do you feel you have any mental condition that's impacting what you're saying here?" I asked him if he was on any sort of medication that might be impacting what he was saying there, and he said no to both those questions. But obviously, experts will analyze everything he said, and who knows? We don't know. We're not privy to knowing right now what he's been saying to authorities since his arrest.
Well, that's what I was thinking about too. And I've been kind of talking about this around the water cooler as well. Like, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors right now.
But
Uh,
yeah,
but the but to he pleaded not guilty. He put in his not guilty plea at the
which is
top,
the
right?
formal.
Which is
Yeah.
the formality. Whether or not he decides to stick with that, who knows? I mean, considering he's got a confession. Do you worry about, or did you worry at all about how him confessing on television basically to you would affect the police investigation on this? Have they talked to you about that at all?
I worried about it since. I didn't worry about it before because, again, there was no preparation time. And I think I mentioned that our news director had alerted the police he was on his way, again, largely for safety. And we didn't want to interfere with any police investigation. We also certainly didn't want to be working with the police, which is, certainly not the case. And we knew he was being surveilled. They told us, "Oh, we know he's on his way because we're right behind him," basically. We were looking at it from a journalistic point of view, not from,
Mhm.
the prosecution's point of view, not from the police's point of view. I was doing this from the role of a journalist and a reporter.
Well, exactly. You were doing your job. I mean, your job was like, as soon as they said, "Hey, we've got this incredible interview coming up. Can you please sit in the chair and help us, walk through what could be and what turned out to be, Greg? I mean, 1.2 million views so far on your YouTube page in a few days. Did you expect this kind of tsunami?
Absolutely not. No, I just, it was an interview. It was a powerful interview. I'm glad we got to the truth and I'm glad we were able to report that. But no, I did not expect
How are you doing with it?
that. Okay. I will tell you this. I just walked past the lobby on my way here to do this interview and just had a funny feeling walking past that lobby. I, I think about it a lot. Um, and and then I try to get it out of my head, you know? So
Yeah, I mean, that lobby's gonna be tied to an event in your life.
yeah, but I don't want it to be about me and about an event in my life. I just, I've done this for 45 years. I've done a lot of interviews and a lot of other interviews that I'm very proud of and exposed. That my regular beat is I have a franchise called You Paid For It, and I report on government waste at the state capitol in Albany, and there's plenty of fodder there here in New York State, and you know that's been my life's work, or at least my work for the last 20 years or so. Um, so I have all that. But again, I just I appreciate you having me on, and
Yeah,
I
no, of
had
course.
the eyewitness seat history here, if you will. But I just again don't think the story's about me.
No, and I don't think you think the story's about you. I think that it's more like just as a reporter to a reporter, someone who's been in situations where, kind of the floor drops out afterwards, where you just did not expect people to maybe react, even though it was an extraordinary moment, to see that. I don't think I've ever seen someone confess like that on purpose on TV like that. I
Yeah,
really
it's
I can't
very
think of
different. That's
anything.
No, I can acknowledge that it's very different, and I've learned that from the reaction that yeah, people haven't seen this sort of thing before, so that's makes it, I guess, more of a news story.
It is, but I once again, I just wanna say, like, I'm glad you were the one in the seat. I think it was an incredibly well handled interview, and it just speaks to all those years that you had behind you, all that experience saying, "We're just gonna get to the truth." That's all we want right now.
I appreciate that, and that's what we did want. I mean, that's the role of a journalist, is to try to get to the truth, and our we did that as a team here, and it just worked out the way it did.
Yeah, I was proud of your cameraman, your photog in there. I heard him say, "Yep, you were like, 'Are we good?'" Like, that's like, "We got the red light on, everything just recorded, it's stuck to whatever tape or video, digital, whatever. Please tell me it's still there." And,
Matt Whitlock is his name, and you did a tremendous job. Yes.
well done, Matt. We all appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. I'm using up too much of it, but I do think this was such an extraordinary moment. I'm so glad you were able to talk to me about it.
Oh, I appreciate your interest and your kind words, and we'll follow the story and keep you posted, man.
Yeah, there's definitely more to come. You think he'll represent himself?
I don't.
No.
He's a very smart individual, and I hope for his sake he doesn't. I
Smart enough
hope he.
not to do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's the old Mark Twain line. I think it's Mark Twain. Only a man represents himself as a fool for a client. I hope he avails himself of all the legal help he can get, and all the and and all the all kinds of help he can get. Um,
Yeah, he needs help too. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much. I appreciate it, Greg. It was so interesting.
Thanks for having me, Ann.